Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This one is going to be going over the Kickstarter project draft that they've given newsletter subscribers access to. So once again, Voyage of the Unity Kickstarter actually goes live where you can back it May 20th. So this went up last night, but obviously right now we're 5 days to go. So very, very close. And here is a preview that at least gets a lot of the basics out of the way in terms of what's going to be present on the Kickstarter at the start. We have stuff like how much the different pledge tiers cost. They do break down what is in each of these pledge tiers. They cover some extra details on what's actually in the books, which is good. What's not here is it doesn't go over the details of what the stretch goals are basically at all. So that's going to be a big thing when it actually launches, but let's jump into it here. So straight away, we have the basics. We have the main image for Voyage of the Unity. We have the offer where if you back in the first 60 hours and you get a physical product here, you will get a free Fire Nation coin. This Legendary Edition for $249, so $250, is going to be the featured one that they're really pushing, that I guess they're going to want most people to get. We'll discuss the pricing in a moment, but we'll go through it here. A lot of this stuff is the basics that we already have from previous stuff. It's already up on the actual preview page of the Kickstarter. It's up on the draft as well. Here is an image, IRL, basically a proper image of what one of the bending scrolls, which is going to be one of the main add-ons, what it actually looks like folded out. So it's 39 inches by 17 inches. This is the water bending scroll, highlighting that it's a full-on physical item. It unscrolls kind of like this. So it seems kind of cool, given that it's going to be one of the more expensive kind of physical items as part of this. They cover what the Avatar Legends role-playing game is, if you're not familiar, that it also kind of debuted on Kickstarter and did exceptionally well. And this is going to be Beadle and Grimm doing one of the kind of expansions effectively for the game with physical extras. Then they go over the details on in terms of the lore, what are they doing here? This is set in the Roku era, which is this, if you're not familiar with it, of course. Again, Roku being the avatar before Aang, for anyone maybe coming to this who doesn't usually follow my channel. The Unity is, of course, a ship that travels across the world, spreading technological kind of information and kind of spreading peace in this era where there actually is a lot of tension. It's a year-long voyage. It seems to start from the Southern Water Tribe and go downwards, but we'll have to wait and see exactly how that plays out. And it's being run by Teak, which is this very long name, which I still don't know how to actually pronounce, but we'll get into more of that in a second. Player characters are going to help out on the Voyage of the Unity, of course. And here is the reward items. So this is going to be the core of this. Most of what the actual content that you're getting on this is 5 adventures. Now, this is very much in line with a lot of the previous material for the RPG. The Wan Shi Tong Adventure Guide and the Uncle Iroh Adventure Guide were both effectively what this is. This is effectively the Unity Adventure Guide, just interestingly presented now as all separate booklets. But I really do hope that at some point a stretch goal combines all of this into a hardcover book so it's in line with previous books. So they cover what's in the 5 booklets. Again, it's 5 adventures, all kind of pre-prepared adventures that you can participate in, all related to the Unity in the Roku era. First one, Welcome to the Unity, is the introductory scenario, where we're introduced to some of the key characters, including Talkukak, who obviously we know from the core book and the Wan Shi Tong Adventure Guide is a legend NPC. He's Roku's waterbending teacher, who we did see in the backstory episode for Roku 306 in the show. But it also covers a lot of the other stuff. Key crew, passengers, includes original art, which is cool, as well as the opening scenario, which is locating a stowaway and dealing with some other conflicts right as the Unity is kind of getting underway at the start of the journey. Number 2 is called the Temple of Ukoa. Again, not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but interestingly, this one is about Natsuo Island, which, if you're maybe not super familiar with like the novels and the other RPG material, you might be like, what's Natsuo Island, but if you are, you know that, hey, this is a kind of disputed region in the Roku era between the Earth Kingdom and the Fire Nation, because it's like an island in between the two. And from the Yang Chen era, this is obviously quite heavily related to a lot of the plot kind of stuff going on there with one of the kind of villains and like Project Unanimity and stuff like that. It's the Natsuo Island chain of islands. Unclear. There's some vagueness about which specific island a lot of that stuff is happening on, but you know, that sort of idea. And then I believe in the Korra era, we know Natsuo Island is incorporated into the United Republic, so it's quite a kind of important place in terms of historically where it gets kind of brought in. But what happens on Natsuo Island is that fire-breathing figure appears at night, destroying equipment. This causes issues between the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom, relating to the conflict, of course, over this place. The locals claim that the mysterious figure is a spirit of a dragon for whom the ancient shrine was built. So there's some interesting stuff here. We're actually going to go maybe a little bit more in-depth on Natsuo Island, so that one could be quite interesting. Number 3 is called Dead Calm. This one seems to be out at sea rather than in any specific location. The ship encounters a storm, captain makes some mistakes, and then the passengers try to get someone else installed kind of as the captain to steer the ship. And there's political tensions about, you know, which faction, I guess, is going to have the captain of the ship on their side, that sort of thing. But also the ship's at risk. Interesting. Part 4, Wings of Destiny, is that we stop at the Fire Nation at a port during the Festival of Zito. Again, the fire avatar before Roku, so that's the avatar before Yang Chen. And the city's autocratic ruler wants to kill a young wounded dragon to advance her son's career, because of course at this point in the Roku era, Sozin has just about implemented the rule of hunting dragons for sport to gain a sense of honor and power and gain the title of dragon. So you're trying to save a dragon here, which is interesting if we go in depth on dragons and what's actually happening with them more in this era. Part 5, A Devious Wind, is that we stop at a port on the way to Ba Sing Se. There's a pirate attack aided by someone on board, so you have to find the saboteur, fend off the pirates. And the Unity is drifting closer to the Serpent's Pass, which is quite interesting as well. So it seems interesting. There's definitely a couple of fascinating ones where, like, introductory, Natsuo Island is very interesting. This seems to get more into the politics in depth. Stuff about dragons and the Fire Nation seems quite cool. And then Serpent's Pass with pirates, that could be interesting. So it all seems quite good. And then the kind of main lore section of this book is going to be this one here, the Guide to the Unity, which has facts about the ship, the dimensions, specifications, layout, notable crew members and passengers, and they go over who the leader of each of the different nations' delegation actually is. So we have Imaru, long believer in the mission of the Unity, uses her position to organize events to bring everyone closer together. So again, you have the ambassadors here. These are not the schemers that are kind of associated with the Voyage of the Unity. These are people actually trying to bring the nations together. So we have Tufan, leader of the Air Nomad delegation, delights in teasing Imaru about this steam engine, has a good sense of humor. Amaruk, leader of the Water Tribe delegation, old friend of Takukak, and the one who brought him on board. Kai Hong is the leader of the Earth Kingdom delegation. She believes that the Unity's mission and sees the Unity as a sort of floating avatar because it's all nations together, which seems quite cool. Then we get into the new legend NPCs. So these, of course, are going to be characters who get new art, which is quite significant. We always want to see that new official art for key characters. And these are the legend characters that we are getting. So we're getting Teak, Rig, and Yanig. Don't know how to say that particularly quickly, but Teak is here. Richest person from the South Pole, isn't shy about throwing her money around, always looking for people to help guard the Unity. She's facilitating this whole thing happening. And again, we've heard about her from the core book before. Master Lanzig is brand new for this book. Never heard about this character before. Assigned to the Unity by Queen Guozun, that's the Queen of Omashu, not the Earth Queen. There is an Earth King of this era as well. He is famous for fighting local corruption, does everything he can to fight the Daofei and their bribery of local politicians. So Daofei obviously being bandits and pirates, more of an issue in the Kyoshi era, but obviously continue to a certain extent into this era, just in a kind of lesser capacity. That could be interesting, but I do immediately wonder, what is the significance of this character that he gets a legend NPC thing, maybe above someone like the Queen? But I guess this has to be an active character, whereas the Queen is probably always going to stay in Omashu. Ernun Ryoshan, of course, we know, pretty much have known for quite a while, is going to be included in this, and yet this just confirms it, of course. So heavily related to Princess Zaysan, that's Sozin's sister's story. They're in a kind of relationship that can't really be, because Zaysan, in her position, has to have the arranged marriage with Kondro, and all that sort of stuff happening. Again, we seem to have art for Ryoshan here. This would fit her as a chi-blocking air nomad who also has airbending. And she also seems to be pictured here. So they're really kind of highlighting her, which seems quite cool. I do wonder also, going back here, is this a kind of sample of what Teak looks like? Because clearly you can see here, Water Tribe female character, looks maybe kind of like they're from Wealth, potentially. Just a guess, but just worth maybe considering. And then we get into the last character, Uzuku Yuyan, legendary Fire Nation archer traveling with the Unity. Again, we know this character from the original kind of core book for the RPG. This seems to be the character who the Fire Nation are going to somehow convince to bring the Yuyan kind of on board with the Fire Nation military, creating the situation that we know from ATLA, and sort of transitioning between like what we learn about in like the Yang Chen era with like Jujinta, and we didn't quite go in depth on his whole Yuyan archer thing, but this kind of seems to be the connection to a lot of that stuff. So fascinated to see what else they give us about Uzuku Yuyan, what she looks like, that whole sort of situation. So nice selection, and who knows, there might be stretch goals for maybe more characters. We have to wait and see. Encounter and location cards, so they do seem to stand up. And there seems to be descriptions on the back, so that's kind of cool. There's the GM screen, which seems to come in every iteration of this, which is interesting. The world map, of course, we've seen this before. Very nice, printed on heavy paper. I wonder, will there be upgrades to that? Avatar Legends map case here. Faux leather case for storing your world map, adventure maps, and other handouts. So that's cool. Just somewhere to store a lot of the paper stuff. Bending scroll. So this is a significant thing, especially at the higher end stuff. This is the most expensive item effectively in the set. So you get the water bending scroll, which is going to come with a lot of the higher tiers, but there is also an earth bending, air bending, and fire bending scroll. Additional scrolls may be unlocked via stretch goals. So that seems to suggest that there's these standard 4 plus potentially 1 or 2 more that will come in via stretch goals. I'm guessing for maybe lightning generation. Otherwise, like, what else would they do? Would there be lava? You know, they'd be the ones that I think people will probably want, is some of those specialized ones as bending scrolls, but we'll see what else they do, because the one that you'd maybe expect they're already doing in the Dancing Dragon, which again is a fire scroll, but seems to be different than the fire scroll here. This is only available as part of the Dragon Edition, and they don't show off what exactly it is, which is interesting given that they seem to be suggesting that this one is of higher value than the other bending scrolls. So they need to convince us of that. Here's the coin set, of course. You can see 2 Fire Nation coins, 1 water and 1 earth coin in a pouch. So that's cool. Then we get into the pledge reward tiers. So obviously you have your standard digital edition. No physical items, no shipping. You're just paying this much to get the content in digital form through Drive-Thru RPG. So, 29. I think that's relatively fine. It's maybe, you know, $4 maybe more expensive than perhaps maybe it should be. But it's fine, I think, ultimately, especially if maybe there is more content that gets added into this. That's relatively in line with what I would expect, ultimately. So if you just want the content, there's that. The first physical edition is the standard edition for $59, so $60. And this is the standard set that they seem to be offering. So you get the 5 adventures, the Guide to the Unity, a rules booklet with condensed rules. The GM screen, you still get the PDFs are included here, and it all comes in a box. This kind of navy colored box, but this is your standard version. I do agree with some of the comments that have been on this already, which is that I think for some people who have a lot of the previous stuff, you already have a GM screen for this game. Is it possible to get a version of this that's basically this minus the GM screen to drop the price down even more if you just want physical copies of the books basically in the box? Because I'm assuming again that this stuff all will be collected together into a hardcover book, so this will be more like a book in a box with the GM screen. And that fits for I think 60 because most of their books like the Uncle Iroh Adventure Guide is 40. The GM screen here, and I think in previous campaigns, was 20, so that makes sense that it's, 60. So the idea is that you get the rule book and the box as kind of quote-unquote extras, and who knows, there might be a couple of extra things that get added in as more and more stretch goals get met, and the value will go from already being, I think, solid to slightly better. So that's fine. The deluxe edition then, $99, so $100, is the same as above, except the box now changes to be grey with colours for the element symbols. But the extras that you get are now, they add in the coin set and the avatar map. Now, if we scroll down, we can actually get the price of these in terms of add-ons. Well, some of them. The coin set is $25, and they don't list the map as an add-on. So, we can go back here and sort of figure it out. It's obviously going to be 60 plus 25, that's 85, meaning that they roughly value the map kind of poster thing as being about $15, which I think is perfectly fine. Again, given that there was a White Lotus tile as part of the original Kickstarter and they're selling that to this day for about 10, the fact that you're getting like 4 coins in a pouch for 25 seems okay. Again, maybe there'll be extra value by the end of the campaign with stretch goals, but this seems solid. So I'd say the first 3 tiers, digital, standard, and deluxe, all seem good. The problems I think come in when we get to the higher tiers. So Legendary Edition bumps it up by $150, and we'll cover that in a second. And then Dragon Edition adds another $150 on top of that. And we'll really have to cover if this is worth what's happening here. So straight away, what you can see here, the box changes again from grey to being more kind of Roku kind of red style thing, but almost seems less interesting than before. So will anything fancy happen with this? Maybe, hopefully, you'd expect some foiling at least on this. Otherwise, it's the same stuff as before. But the big ticket item is that they add in the waterbending scroll. So just one, you get a waterbending scroll. 15 plus in-world handouts, which is this kind of pile of paper here. We don't really know the full extent of them, but there's clearly like an image of a dragon, some flyers and stuff like that. 10 plus encounter and location cards, which are kind of these kind of stand-up kind of things that have pictures of locations, characters, that sort of things. But there's only 10 of them, so that's interesting. The map case, which it will contain a lot of your stuff, so that's that. 4 large area maps, which I definitely will want more details on in terms of what are they, how big are these in comparison to the world map, and then what's the value that's going on here. Because again, we're starting from 100, and what's being added on here, the box, I guess, becomes slightly bigger. It's really hard to judge what the pricing is on that. The bending scroll gets added on, and as you can see here, bending scrolls are 45 each. So that's 45. Plus the map case, that's 20, that's 65 extra, so 165 to 250, that leaves 85 left over if I have my math correctly. And the only stuff that 85 accounts for is the 15 in-world handouts, the 10 encounter and location cards, and the 4 large area maps. So it all seems to be paper content that makes up that 85. And you can sort of figure that out. If they're pricing the Avatar world map at about 15, 4 large maps kind of makes up about 60 perhaps, and then maybe they're slightly smaller, so they're maybe like 10 each. that's like maybe 40-ish. Maybe they're charging 15-ish for like the cards, depending on how many there are. The handouts is obviously very hard to judge because they seem small-ish, but they probably will be printed on decent-sized kind of stuff. So it's like, it sort of begins to make sense when you break it down like that, but at the same time, it does feel like they're kind of overcharging for a lot of paper add-ons that they haven't really covered in the details that are here in a lot of detail. So I'm assuming when the actual campaign goes live, they're probably going to need to cover in a lot more detail what the handouts actually are. They might, for spoiler reasons, maybe not want to show off all of them, but I kind of would be like, hey, this is a lot of money. You probably should show people what they're going to be getting here. That would be my thoughts on it. So I'm not quite seeing the really strong value prospect here for the Legendary Edition. Maybe by the end of it, they might do a thing where maybe an extra bending scroll gets kind of thrown in here. Maybe there is like an extra booklet or something like that that gives it a little bit more value. It just seems like quite a lot. And especially considering how much stuff extra is kind of getting added on here compared to like what's here. I would like to see some of this stuff maybe added in as add-ons, like the handouts. How much are the handouts on their own? Because I might consider going for the deluxe edition plus the handouts to have the unique art. How much is that going to cost? Are they going to offer that at all? Or what? I'd also maybe like the 4 area maps depending on what they look like. How much is that going to cost me? And I think this is where like there is just a bit of an issue with the pricing here for Legendary Edition and the Dragon Edition, as we'll get to. So Dragon Edition then jumps up to 400. So it's 150 more than this, which was already 150 more than this. So we're already maybe struggling a little bit with at least maybe $30-$40-ish in terms of the pricing here. Now, what does the Dragon Edition add on? What it adds on is you get the exclusive Dancing Dragon scroll and then 2 additional bending scrolls of your choice. So I think the most notable takeaway from this is it's not everything in the Kickstarter. There are 5 scrolls that they talk about here. There is a standard one for Fire, Earth, Air, Water, and also a separate Dancing Dragon scroll. It's not that the Dancing Dragon scroll is the Fire scroll. There are 2 Fire scrolls basically, but one is special. So the Water one is already included. And then you get to choose 2 of Earth, Air, and Fire. So there will always be one that's sort of left out of just getting the Dragon Edition. But then you get Dancing Dragon scroll. I suppose the idea maybe here is that you go for Water, Dancing Dragon is your Fire, and then you get Earth and Air, and you just leave out the other Fire one. But I think people who are going in for this edition probably want everything. And so the idea that you have to buy this plus another add-on on top, and it basically means that this tier, probably for a lot of people getting it, is actually going to be more like $445 rather than $400 straight away is a problem. But does the math work out here? Because again, what we have is that the bending scrolls are 45. So 2 of them is 90. They don't tell you how much the Dancing Dragon scroll effectively is. So that leaves it as there would be 60 left over. So they're pricing the Dancing Dragon scroll as an exclusive thing as being $15 more expensive than one of the other scrolls, even though they don't actually show you what's sort of special about it. I'm assuming the art is maybe slightly different, representing that it kind of comes from maybe a more ancient culture, maybe it has more dragon art on the inside. That might make it fancier, but they don't really show you that to explain why it's particularly good value here. So yeah, that's the kind of big issue. 250 plus 90 gives you a 340, and then yeah, the Dancing Dragon scroll has to be the equivalent of 60 basically. And then yeah, I do think it's kind of odd that the 2 bending scrolls, it's 2 of basically the 3 leftovers. But remember that there are going to apparently be more of these via stretch goals. So you might actually be making a choice of 2 from maybe 4 or 5 extra scrolls. Like, who knows what the situation is going to be here. And that's a little bit frustrating. They do also offer some of the previous role-playing game stuff as add-ons here if you don't have it already. So there is that. Let's get into the shipping here. They say almost anywhere in the world, which is technically correct, but it's a little bit more restrictive than you maybe think it actually is. Shipping and taxes will be charged through the BackerKit Pledge Manager after the campaign closes. Okay. These are estimates for shipping costs. Stuff might change, but here is the table of roughly what it's actually going to be. So no shipping, of course, on the digital versions, and you can see here standard, it's going to be 10 for the US, 18 for EU, Australia, sorry. Canada and the UK is going to be 15 and 20 for the rest of the world. And you see it goes up roughly as more stuff gets added to each of the editions. You can see Deluxe and Legendary are about the same. Dragon Edition adds a bit more on, that whole idea. All shipping is US, EU, Canada, UK, and Australia friendly. We'll cover all this stuff to ensure that you receive it from a local address. So this is going to be how they basically avoid customs effectively in these territories. Pledges shipping to US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand will not incur any additional taxes or customs. Backers in the UK and European Union will be charged VAT. So for me, I guess I will be charged the price of my pledge plus the cost of shipping plus VAT, which I guess is fine, something you do have to factor in. There will not be any additional taxes or customs fees for regions not listed above. Packages sent outside of these regions will be shipped delivery duty unpaid, and you might have to pay customs and taxes, that whole sort of thing. They can't ship to Africa, just full stop, all of Latin America, okay, the entire Middle East, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, okay, makes sense. They can't find a reliable way to ship to those regions. Some of that I think makes sense, but then some of it kind of feels like, really? Just flat out, entire region gone? I do understand to a certain degree that I think Latin America seemed like it caused a bit of problems for the previous Legends Kickstarter, where it seemed like there was a lot more issues when it came to that side of things there. But that is kind of unfortunate because Avatar has a pretty big following in some Latin American countries. So that one seems a little bit restrictive, but there probably are ways to kind of maybe have it shipped somewhere else and get it forwarded to you. But it's always awkward to have to go through extra steps to make that sort of stuff happen, of course. PDFs will be done through DriveThruRPG, makes sense. And all the team of people that are involved. Risks and challenges. They talk about all the previous stuff that they've done. They highlight that the art and stuff like that isn't fully final, but, you know, they'll make sure it all works out fine. And then they do note about tariffs, global trade disruptions they can't really account for, and they'll do their best to manage that. So hopefully nothing crazy happens here that's going to cause anyone who backs this to have to pay a lot more. I'm assuming if something super crazy happens, they'll probably have to really offer people the opportunity to cancel if it's going to be like particularly crazy. But we'll see what exactly happens here. So my overall thoughts so far are that it seems pretty decent, but I definitely have some key questions. Mainly when it comes to like this stuff. I think, like I said, 1, 2, 3. The standard 3 editions seem fine. I think, especially after a lot of extras get added on with stretch goals, they'll be perfectly fine in terms of value. Actually, quickly, I forgot to mention, this is actually a key detail as well I wanted to talk about. Estimated delivery for every single tier is July 2026, meaning that it'll be like about nearly 2 years or something like that, 1.5 to 2 years between RPG releases here. I do wonder what Magpie are doing themselves with regards to like when's their next book, not through Beadle and Grimm, is happening. When is the Spirit World book coming out? Because it feels like this is actually going to be a really big gap between content here, that this is happening second half of next year. That even by the time the campaign comes to an end, it's still going to be over a year away. I'm wondering, might they change the digital edition stuff so that they do maybe send that out a little bit ahead of time? Because that's what Magpie have always done, is that the second the digital versions are done, they basically send them to you. So I'm wondering, might this be slightly adjusted as we get closer to release? But certainly all the physical stuff, it says July 2026. So it is quite a bit away, ultimately there, which is, I think, a bit unfortunate. But yeah, getting back to what I was saying, the first three tiers seem fine. I think the problems get in when we're suddenly trying to understand the value and cost of the stuff in the legendary editions, especially this one and the Dragon edition. Retailer tier is kind of irrelevant. A lot of it, I think, comes down to the fact that they don't really cover what exactly some of the stuff actually is that you're kind of getting here. Like, they cover what the encounter cards are, the map case, but they don't establish like what the handouts are. They don't really cover what the 4 other maps are and explain why they're priced effectively the way they are with the tiers. That doesn't feel super great. So I would very much want to know what the stretch goals actually are. Clearly, at least 1 or 2 of them add in extra bending scrolls. Other than that, I'm assuming one of them at some point probably will turn it all into a hardcover book. I'd be really annoyed if they didn't do that. That seems kind of odd. Like, to the point where I would probably have included that in here somewhere, even though it's the preview. So stretch goals are going to be quite important to explain this, because otherwise I think they might need to drop the prices at least a little bit to just make it seem a bit better value. But again, we don't know. Maybe they've factored in already that the Legendary Edition, in reality, with what they predict this to do in terms of how much it will make, the Legendary Edition is this at the start, but it will also have all this other stuff by the end that they're pretty sure will just get added in based on what their stretch goals are. But that is just speculation. I do want to be clear about that. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on what we have so far with the Kickstarter campaign. What are your thoughts on the pricing, what they are offering here, and I suppose especially, what your thoughts are on like legend NPC characters that we're going to see, some of the new art and characters that we seem to have here. But yeah, are you going to be backing this, looking out on the 20th when it launches to see what happens? Otherwise, like I said, I will be back on the 20th to go over the full campaign. We'll cover anything that has changed from this preview to the final version. We'll cover hopefully what the stretch goals actually are and stuff like that. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.